Hello and welcome to Morning Java, brought to you as always by GetGo Cafe and Market, where right now you can get a breakfast combo for $3.99, get you a hash brown, sandwich, and a small coffee.
Or you can get 2 breakfast bagels for $5.
Double the fun, Dale. I'm Chris Carter, he's Dale Lolley, and we are here, of course, talking Steelers football on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Dale, I got a piece that's coming out that came out this morning talking about the quarterback situation and the progress of Josh Dobbs versus what's going on with Mason Rudolph right now. I'm gonna get your critique on what you've seen and what you've been around the Steelers long enough to see many young quarterbacks that come into the system, even as backups, and how they progress. My vision, at least comparing these two, I think Dobbs has taken a much more aggressive approach to this season, and he's feeling a lot more comfortable, at least take more chances. But I think the Steelers in general, they're pushing their quarterbacks, hey, we want you to try and make those big throws, and we want to see what you actually have.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they want these guys to take chances, especially in the preseason. Nobody's going to kill these young quarterbacks, maybe some fans, over throwing some interceptions in the preseason. I know you ideally don't want to start the Green Bay game the way both of them did on their first throws. But you want them to be aggressive.
Right.
Especially, it's something that's difficult for a young quarterback, especially for a guy like Mason Rudolph, who's coming out of the Big 12, where he's seeing guys running wide open 90% of the time. There's a transition period there. We saw Josh Dobbs struggle last year with some of his throws in the games. He did not look great, and we've seen a much different player this year. I think if Mason Rudolph can make that a similar transition next year, I think he's played better thus far than Dobbs did last year in his preseason games. He's obviously got more upside potential. Not that Dobbs doesn't have some upside potential,
right?
But I think you look at Josh Dobbs as maybe a career 2 at best, whereas Mason Rudolph has starter potential.
And I think that's the overall message, is that this is a guy, there's a reason he was picked in the 3rd, and he was projected to potentially be a first by some teams because he has that upward trajectory. So Dale, talking about, let's switch to a national stage. Let's talk about some fantasy football, because I don't know about you, but right now it's time to get your mocks out, do your practice runs of where you're going to be in your drafts, and get ready, because it's draft season for NFL fantasy.
And Chris, one of the big mistakes that people make in fantasy football, especially new people who are new to doing this, is drafting quarterbacks early.
Classic mistake.
Because you look at everybody's rankings and projections, you say, well, Aaron Rodgers is projected to average 25 points a game,
right?
And the top running back is only projected
13.
to average 18 or whatever,
something like that.
Why wouldn't I take Aaron Rodgers in the first round?
Because the next guy after Aaron Rodgers is going to get you not that much less. The drop off, and maybe for you and fantasy nutheads like us out here that study this stuff a lot, understand this, but there's a big misconception that a lot of people, they fall themselves into because they believe, oh, the quarterback's going to get me the points. No. Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Matt Ryan, like that class of super fantasy quarterbacks, the drop off from them is very much cushioned by the other quarterbacks that are able to put up huge numbers, like Russell Wilson or Cam Newton, even when he's having a good year. But where it comes to running backs, there are maybe 10 that you can rely on and be for every week to be a starter. And after that, it is a serious drop-off.
Put it this way, Chris. There were 8 quarterbacks last year who threw for 4,000 or more yards. And that doesn't include Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck, both of whom are back this year.
Right.
So now you're looking at the possibility of 10, maybe some other guys sneak into that
conversation.
Watson. Yeah, some guys who sneak into that conversation. So, unless you can guarantee me that an Aaron Rodgers is going to throw 50 touchdown passes, in which case then he would be a first-round draft guy, maybe, and you still wouldn't even probably draft him in the first round. Maybe take him in the second.
Yeah.
Unless you can guarantee that, then you don't take the quarterback in the first round.
Yeah, it's just the value is what you're drafting.
Wait until about round 8 after you've filled out the rest of your roster, other than your starter, your kicker.
I might go round 5. I
want 3 running backs. I want 3 receivers.
See, that's the thing. If it depends. If I get to a point where Aaron Rodgers is sitting there in the 5th round and I have a choice to pick Sterling, what's his face?
Sterling Shepard.
Yeah, Sterling Shepard. I almost call him Sharp.
But you get a chance to draft Sterling Sharp in his prime.
Then that would be great. That would be ideal. So Dale, let's talk about. We're talking to Pittsburgh right now.
Yes.
And everyone in Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh
fans. Yeah.
You want to know, when do I draft the Steelers and when do I get Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell? Those are obvious. Those are your first picks. You automatically pick them first.
Those guys are in the top 5 picks.
Almost in every draft.
League. Yeah. Anywhere you go in the country, those guys are in the top 5.
But where do you get, say, Juju Smith-Schuster, say Ben Roethlisberger, maybe James Washington, players that maybe don't jump off the charts, or Vance McDonald? Where do you go and make those moves?
If I'm looking at Juju Smith-Schuster, he'll be the next guy selected off the board among the Steelers players. I'm looking at him because he's a wide receiver too on his own team.
Yep.
So you got to start looking at him after some of those top level first number 1 receivers are gone. So there's about 15 guys for sure that I would take ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah.
Then you start looking at that second level of guys. Okay, you got some number 1 receivers on some other teams that you look at and say, okay, maybe a Marvin Jones or someone like that who's not a star, but he's a guy that he's a number 1 on his team. I'm looking at Juju Smith-Schuster as maybe somewhere between, in terms of where the wide receivers are being picked, the 17th to 20th best wide receiver in the league.
That's fair.
And that's where I'd probably take him. He's going to score some touchdowns this year.
Yeah, he's got to score more touchdowns. Almost had 1,000 yards last year, and that's considering that Ben Roethlisberger didn't play in the end, and also that he took some time for him to integrate into the offense.
His first half was really a wash. I think he had 10 catches in his first 6 games, something along those lines. So, yeah, I think that's what you're looking for him. For James Washington, I'm looking farther on down. You're looking at a number. Realistically, Antonio Brown's going to get his catches. Le'Veon Bell's going to get his catches. Juju Smith-Schuster.
I think Vance is going to get a lot of points. Then you look at Vance McDonald.
So he's really maybe the 5th or 6th option on his own team.
Yeah.
You don't take that guy. Maybe you take a flyer on him.
He's your backup flex.
60th wide receiver, and you hope that maybe he turns into Juju Smith-Schuster down the road. If you're in a keeper league, you definitely take him.
Oh, absolutely.
And then Vance McDonald, I look at, he's going right now in the 20s among tight ends. I think he maybe outproduces that a little bit. But realistically, with the tight end position, once you get past those first maybe 6, then you can kind of throw a blanket over picks 7 through 20.
That's my general policy with tight ends. If I don't draft Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, or any of the big names, then I'm just going to wait until I get all my depth positions in order. And then when it gets to the 12th or 13th round, then I'm like, okay, let's see if I can pick a sleeper tight end somewhere that people aren't going to be looking at, and then I'll make my move. But tight end to me has always been one of those positions that you can kind of throw away unless you get one of those guys to fall to.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
All right, now before we jump into the last one, let's talk. We forgot to talk about Ben Roethlisberger. Where would you draft him right now? I'm going at him. If I'm drafting Ben Roethlisberger, it means I've either waited a long time to draft a quarterback or already have one, and I'm thinking, let me get a really good number 2, because Ben has not been the best fantasy guy.
Well, and the reason he's not the best fantasy guy is his home road splits are so uneven.
My gosh.
At home,
he lights it up.
He's as good as any quarterback in the league. Yeah. On the road, not so much. So if you draft Ben Roethlisberger as your number 1 quarterback, you better make sure you back him up with
a solid number 2.
A Matt Ryan or somebody like that. And here we are talking about Ben Roethlisberger and Matt Ryan, who are superb quarterbacks in real life, not being great fantasy quarterbacks. But that's what you have to do in those kind of situations. And then you play Ben when he's at home, and you play the other guy when he's
away.
When he's away, unless he has a really great matchup with somebody. They're going to New Orleans this year. If you think that's going to be a shootout, have at it.
Man, not with that New Orleans defense. I'm not touching the Saints. But I think that's a fair assessment. But let's talk about, because we're talking about guys now in the middle parts of the draft. Who are guys that are sleeper picks? And I'm not saying like the super late picks. Like I thought I was a genius for picking Deshaun Watson with my last pick last year. I was for about 5 weeks until he got hurt. But who's a guy in those middle rounds that you think is going to be the steal that can win somebody a season that, at the end of the year, people are like, wow, I wish I would have picked him in my top 3.
Well, last year I took Kareem Hunt in the 6th round of my draft.
That's a steal.
And, he was my 3rd back, and obviously he outperformed that. This year, the guy I'm targeting is Royce Freeman from Denver. I think he's going to win that job outright. And as we've seen over the years, Denver backs can be quite prosperous, and I think they're going to have a better offense this year.
And they're also going to need to rely on that running game.
Well, they've got good receivers on the outside, a better quarterback this year, so I think that it kind of loosens some things up a little bit.
Yeah, and you see the way that Case Keenum was used with the Vikings. Maybe there's some running backs there. I'm going for Tyreek Hill. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this guy. He's going to be a guy I think that really produces, especially with Patrick Mahomes. gonna be just gonna be air raid. They're just gonna be bombing all day.
See, I think you're going to struggle.
See,
I think Mahomes is going to struggle.
You think? See, I think that Mahomes, I think he's not going to lead his team to a lot of victories, but I think he's going to have a lot of big plays, and they're going to try and get him some of those easier passes. And Tyreek Hill is going to be the target in those situations. And when he is miss a tackle, that guy hurts you, and that's why I think that he's going to be. Because they also have Sammy Watkins on the other side. I think a lot of teams are like, we have to stop Sammy because he's big, he's fast. Tyreek's smaller. Maybe we can try to handle him. He'll get the easier looks.